Good evening, everyone. It is 6:35, so I believe we are going to get started. I would like to ask Daniel, as our former chair, if you'd like to kick us off, and then upon the election of our planning board chair and vice chair, that person will then take over the meeting. Is that okay with you?
It's fine with me.
Perfect.
I'd like to go ahead and open up tonight's planning board regular meeting for January 21st, 2025, and I'd like to welcome everybody in attendance. I'd like to go ahead and adopt this evening's agenda as with no amendments, if that's possible. Can I get a
motion to approve as presented?
Thank you.
Second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Much apologies about that. I'd like to go ahead and do a roll call to determine a quorum, and for those present this evening, in coordination with item A. Trey, would you mind leading us off?
Trey Taylor.
Ted Tozer.
Pallavi Kardare.
Deepa Limaye.
Daniel Ferris.
John Gemignani.
Rick Kraus.
Thank you very much. Meetings for correction and approval. We have the draft regular meetings from September 17th, 2024. Does anybody have any corrections or notations from that meeting? I know it's been a while.
I don't.
Seeing none, I'd like to go ahead and adopt approval for item C.
Motion to approve minutes from September 17th.
I can second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. I'd like to go ahead and open the floor here to our audience for general public comment for this evening. Does anybody sign up to make a comment this evening? Would anybody like to make a comment this evening that has not signed up? Thank you very much. I'd like to go ahead and move on to item F for new business, since there is no old business. And we'd like to go ahead and move on to item 1 of F for election of planning board chair. I'd like to go ahead and open it up here to my fellow planning board members.
I nominate Daniel Ferris.
And I nominate Deepa Lima.
There are 2 motions on the floor. Trey led off with the first motion. I'd like to go ahead and move on Trey's motion for anybody have a second.
I do second that for Daniel Ferris for chair.
I'd like to go ahead and I believe move to a roll call.
Trey Taylor.
Approved.
Ted Tozer, approved.
John Gemignani.
Pallavi Kardare. Approved.
There goes. You guys leave it on? Yeah, I would just leave it on.
I don't know what I said.
I did not hear what it is that you're voting on.
For Daniel Ferris.
This is yea or nay for Daniel as the chair.
Yes, sir. This is yea or nay for Daniel Ferris as chair. I believe, Pallavi, I'm sorry, do you mind repeating it? I know your microphone was off.
Yeah. Pallavi Kardare. Approved.
I think with that, we do have a majority for approval. With that, I'd like to go ahead and nominate, I do accept the approval from my other planning board members, and I graciously appreciate that vote of support. I'd like to go ahead and nominate Deepa Limaye as my vice chair, please.
Second that.
I approve Pallavi Kardare.
I would like to just ask a question. Is there a need or an opportunity for discussion on either of these, or since you have a majority vote, is that not needed or not appropriate?
You know what? I'll be honest with you. That's a great question, and I'd like to go ahead and defer to Cindy.
Since you've already voted on the motion, there's no
Discussion.
There's no discussion because you already voted on the motion. The time to discuss it is before you vote on it. So if you want to discuss the vice chair, now would be the time to discuss the vice chair.
So the topic is vice chair. The the topic of chair has closed and have been voted and approved, we are on to item 2 for electing a planning board vice chair. I currently have a motion on the floor for Deepa LeMay, and I have 3 yays from Trey, Ted, and Pallavi, and myself, and John. So majority is approved. Rich, would you like to go ahead and cast your vote?
That's not needed.
Thank you.
But I approve.
Thank you, sir. I believe we're all yay. Thank you, Deepa. I'm looking forward to working with you again.
Thank you, everyone, and congratulations, Daniel. We'll work together again. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I'd like to go ahead and move on to item F3 for adoption of the 2025 Planning Board meeting schedule. I took a look at the meeting schedule. It's pretty straightforward. Does anybody have any notations, any holiday conflicts for timing?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think last year we were really good with timings, but a couple of meetings, I guess we went really over, and it was like close to 2 hours. So I would just suggest that we could decide some hard stop and work with the schedule.
Definitely hear that need, and maybe that we can work closely with staff here and see what items, and making sure that we are mindful of our schedules here and the length of time for our volunteers. We will keep that in mind. Appreciate that. Thank you. Can I go ahead and get a motion, if there are no additional comments at this time, to adopt the 2025 Planning Board meeting schedule?
I'll make a motion to accept the schedule.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Moving down to item F4 for rezoning petition RZ015813-2024, Goodwin property. Thank you, Janet. Welcome.
Can I ask a quick question?
Oh, yes, sir.
So we're getting ready to look at 2 rezonings. Are we going to have the same discussion twice? Or can we kind of pair these? Because essentially it's lot beside lot.
The 2 Goodwin properties are kind of, are there any unique points between the 2 differentiating the properties?
Yes.
Only that one has a historic home on it, and the other one is vacant parcel.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
But yeah, we can
No.
kind of combine them as long as they're separate motions, right?
Separate motions, but we can combine topics for discussion.
Right, we can make separate motions at the end, yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Also, is there a way that we can see the presentation on our monitors versus having this? Oh, okay, I've got it now. Okay, I've got it now. Okay.
Wow.
Got it. Sorry.
Okay. We're all good? All right. So I am Janet Parano. I am your senior planner and historic preservation planner. Tonight we're here to talk about 2 rezoning petitions, one for 415 North Providence Street and the other is 501 North Providence Street. Both of these are petitions by Chris Goodwin for rezoning from R4 to TC, Town Center. The property at 415 is approximately 2.64 acres, and the property at 501 is approximately 3.15 acres. So the property outlined here is 415 Providence Street, North Providence. And the 501 is the parcel to the north with the home on there. So the surrounding properties are zoned TC, Town Center, on the north, west, and south, and across the street, properties are zoned R4 residential. The Waxhaw future land use map designates the properties both as downtown. Principal uses include historic Main Street buildings and harmonious infill. Uses include retail, services, offices, artisan studios, light manufacturing, upper story residential, and institutional uses. The purpose of the downtown land use is to foster active streetscapes with preservation of historic buildings and harmonious infill, access to daily needs, entertainment, and upper story housing. We tend to see downtown land uses as a walkable mix of uses in or directly adjacent to the historic central core and street grid of downtown. The requested zoning is TC, Town Center. Town Center zoning allows for the development of larger scale mixed-use buildings that accommodate retail, services, offices, artisan studios, landmark, civic, and institutional uses, as well as upper story apartments. TC is intended to encourage an active urban core that provides employment and housing that complements the design and scale of the historic downtown while maintaining a walkable small town feel. Matt, if you could pull up the other. Thank you. I just want to go back a bit. Let's see. Both of these properties are within the historic district for downtown. The one property has a historic home on it. The applicant has agreed to preserve that home, but it will need to be adapted for reuse as an office building. And then we have a reasonableness and consistency statement that this is consistent with the land use map and comprehensive plan, specifically the goals of highlighting and protecting the historic heritage and encouraging adaptive reuse of historic residential buildings. The reasonableness and consistency statement for 415 is a little bit different because it doesn't have the historic home on it, so we'll have to go back and forth, or you should have both of them in your packet. And then tonight's requested actions are motions for favorable recommendations for each of the applications. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, and the applicant is here this evening if you have questions for him.
I have a question over here. Just if you could speak a little bit to how adaptive reuse is being encouraged on the 501 property. It doesn't say it's required, but you just said that we'll have to make some changes to the building in order to...
Right. It is not required, but we, when we met with the applicant, we did explain that this is a historic structure. It's listed on the National Register, and he agreed that, you know, we should save that building. So there may be some work that needs to be done to convert it from a residence to an office building. There are guidelines from this National Park Service that instruct on how to make reuse for that building. Mm-hmm. And there are tax credits that are available, and of course Waxhaw has the facade grant program that can also assist with making changes to the facade of the building.
But you said it's not required. It's we encourage it through incentives, through grants.
Yes, we encourage it. It is not required. We have a National Historic District, which is basically a way to signify that these buildings are historic and that they are of importance to the town, but they don't provide any protection.
Mm-hmm. Is it any more protected under the current zoning? I mean, is there a downside to the?
No, the zoning doesn't affect it. The only type of zoning that could have an effect would be if we had an historic overlay district, and that would provide more opportunity to preserve buildings because they would be required to apply for a certificate of appropriateness prior to doing any work on the building. And there are ways to, not necessarily prevent, but delay demolition of historic buildings if through a historic overlay district, but we don't have that. So the National Historic Register is just a register. It's a list of places that are of importance, but it doesn't offer any protection for the buildings.
Janet, we did have a historic vision plan, though, correct? Within our historical society, we did have an historic vision plan.
No.
No, we didn't have an adopted historical vision plan.
No, we have a historic district. Years ago, there was some discussion about a local historic district, but that never happened. So no, we don't have a historic vision plan.
Okay. Do we have the age of this home?
I believe it was built in 1906.
1906. Do we know the average age of the homes on that street? Are they all about that same time period, 19-something to 1920s?
Yes, most of them.
That's a pretty well-established
The house
corridor.
directly across the street, it was built in the 1960s, and then, of course, there's some new construction going on there as well.
Off of Miller Drive, I believe. We have some additional units that have come in, and I know that there's been some worry in that area, that area, yes, needs some updates and improvements, especially in the road and transportation corridors to support those areas. Do we have any plans to have any district have that area any additional setbacks to accommodate more walkability, more easements away from the road for pedestrians, or anything in that area?
Well, we wouldn't change the setbacks. Our traffic engineer is here. I guess he could address whether there's any road improvements coming along North Providence.
That would be wonderful if there is any possible road improvements associated that coming for North Providence for those residents.
Sure. So James Kelly, traffic and transportation engineer with the town. As far as roadway improvements along North Providence, there is a mill and overlay that is required as a part of the developments along the area that was identified within their mitigation agreement. So they will be required to mill and overlay both North Providence as well as Blythe Mill Road. In addition, there's some connectivity requirements as well in the area. And then in our pedestrian plan, we are incorporating pedestrian improvements as well for that vicinity.
James, can you elaborate a little bit on what kind of pedestrian improvements that we're trying to serve and provide to the citizens in that area?
Mainly sidewalk maintenance. I know that that area is due for sidewalk maintenance, so we are developing a pedestrian program to help address those maintenance concerns.
I have an additional question regarding the infrastructure in that area. I know that area often has some issues with how much water seems to accumulate in that older area. The drainage ditches are not as maintained as well. There's standard, culverts in some areas. Is there any improvements up and down that district in that to help control what will now be more impervious surface covered by this rezoning?
So I am not a stormwater engineer, so I'm not licensed to comment on that per se. I would have to defer to some of my colleagues who are licensed within that stormwater realm.
Do we have anybody present this evening?
Not this evening, but we can defer that to town staff to get some answers to those questions.
Thank you.
Janet, just out of curiosity, do you have any idea as far as historically why these two lots were kind of an island? With everything else kind of town center, was there any special reason why they were never brought into town center when everything else looks like it did in that side of the street?
Well, I think because all that area that's town center existing, there's that Monarch Center and office buildings along there. The parcels that are zoned residential, they're at 501, it's that existing home. So I guess because there was a home there, it remained residential.
And their lot wasn't connecting to North Providence, not making them qualified for that rezoning when they did the rezoning in 2008?
I wasn't here in 2008. I don't know why it was rezoned
I
like
believe in
that.
2008, when they did the widening for North Providence, they allowed rezoning for residences if their lots connected or were approached by the widening that's supposed to be coming somewhere in the future for the widening of NC 16. And this lot, I don't believe, based off of our maps, and if you don't mind correcting me if I'm wrong, these lots don't connect to, or have any connection to North Providence or NC 16, correct?
Well, they're on North Providence.
No,
They
I'm
don't
sorry.
have any connection to 16, though.
I meant NC 16, my apologies.
No, they don't connect to 16.
So they wouldn't have qualified in 2008 for that rezoning.
Well, there's other parcels that are
But they
TC.
have connecting lots between, they flow all the way through, do they not?
Not the one to the south.
Not to the ones to the south? But the ones to the north?
Yes, the one to the north goes all the way across.
Okay. Madison?
The big shopping center.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had the great privilege of being here during our growth strategy of 2019 to 2020, and I remember this property specifically. So this property used to be one parcel owned by the same owner, and she had subdivided it into two separate lots. And so back in 2019 to 2020, she met with staff along with the other North Providence Street residents and had some concerns about zoning these areas to TC. So her and other residents requested these parcels remain R4 residential because they were currently residential units, residential homes. So typically in zoning, we don't change zoning districts in the middle of a block. We keep it typically consistent with those around it, and this is one of those properties. So back in 2019 to 2020, this property owner requested that it remain residential, so we listened and kept it R4. Now this property has come in for a rezoning request, and that's why you're seeing it here today.
From
So
the
again,
same, from the same owner, or it's changed hands?
I believe it has changed hands, and it is a different property owner now. So this came about when we adopted our land development code in 2021. That's when the zoning district changed, and we got away from our form-based code, and we adopted our land development code. So that's why you see the zoning here as it is.
Thank you. I appreciate you filling in a little bit of the history on that, Madison. Janet, do you mind pulling back up the TC portion to where the uses and setbacks and lot widths dimensional-wise? One of my things that I'm a little afraid of here with this rezoning here is essentially coming into the setbacks. And what kind of setbacks would be required away from the historical home? Do we have two different properties for rezoning, both going for TC?
Right.
Both with setbacks, there's essentially zero lot lines.
Mm-hmm.
How far away would they be able to construct near the historic established home?
Side setbacks.
With side setbacks in TC?
So the side setback, well, I don't know off the top of my head what that side setback is for that home. Say 15, 20 feet, maybe?
I'm just worried that rezoning will open this door to where they can come up right against that historic home with new construction. And not.
Well, they could go to the property line.
They could go to
But
the-
there's still a
But if-
setback on the south side of the existing home. And I know that the intent is to build another similar building, would be with the use as an office building, but to look like a residence, just like what's on 501. So 415 would have the similar.
But we have to consider all possible uses because it's a general rezoning, not a conditional, correct?
Correct.
Okay. That's one of my worries.
That, the property to the south, the direct south of that, that is vacant?
Yes.
And the one that's in pink, that's vacant?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any other commercial businesses on North Providence with the driveway out onto North Providence? We're basically facing the other residents out across the street.
No.
I see that they would have businesses in their backyard, but they have residences in their front yard, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
Follow-up question regarding lot boundaries and lines. With this being commercial use, how would the parking lot be situated possibly? Are we in that phase? Because we would have to consider how much in parking lot in placement and impervious surface possibly, correct? And setbacks and buffers and screening.
So depending on the use would depend on how much parking we need. There is, an existing driveway parking area, I believe.
Screening, since it's going to be commercial use, and we'd also have to consider that those residents would be impacted by light 24/7 for the parking lot, correct?
Okay.
And the commercial activity?
We do have, a lighting plan that would have to be submitted. And right now, we're at the rezoning, not the use, and we don't have a site plan as of yet.
I just see that for me, I think there's some worries and some concerns that I don't think that we can address with the general zoning. But I appreciate and thank you for answering my questions.
Was there any feedback from the neighbors across the street?
Yes.
It was in the packet. Okay.
The feedback was in the packet, I believe, correct? From the neighbors? Was there any responses? No responses?
There was one comment from a resident further up on North Providence Street, but no official comment.
No, so there was one comment from a nearby residence?
Yes, I had one comment.
Was that residence within the notification zone? Were they part of the list of notified residents?
Yeah, right. Yeah, we didn't send anything out yet. That's before the public hearing.
Before the public hearing?
Okay.
Before the public hearing for the
Okay.
BOC.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, any other questions? Can I get a motion for the rezoning of? We have two. We have rezoning petition RZ 015813, and then we also have rezoning RZ 015814. Oh, yes. Can I start with, go ahead and I'm going to start with RZ 015813. Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the rezoning.
We have a motion on the table. All those in favor to accept the rezoning petition RZ 15813. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. Someone needs to second that, I think. And we need, I think we vote, then add the consistency statement.
I'll second the motion.
Can't they combine that?
So there's a motion on the floor. Is there any discussion on the motion? There's a motion to approve on the floor.
There is a motion to approve on the floor from Trey with a second from
And there's a second. I didn't hear the second. I'm sorry.
It's okay. All those in favor of that motion for approval?
Aye.
Nay.
Nay.
Aye.
Motion carries.
You'll need to read the reasonableness and consistency statement into record.
No problem. Can someone pull up the reasonable? The request for petition RZ 015813 is reasonable and consistent with the Waxhaw 2040 future land use plan and the comprehensive plan, specifically the goal of promoting infill development in the downtown Waxhaw. It is reasonable and in the public interest as the parcel is adjacent to other TC zoned properties and will provide diversity to the tax base. Moving on to the second item for Goodwin property, rezoning RZ 01.
You have to approve the
I'm
consistency
sorry.
statement.
I apologize. Can I get a motion to approve the consistency statement?
Motion to approve the consistency statement as stated.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Moving on. Moving on to RZ 015814. Can I get a motion on the table for?
I'll make a motion to accept the petition RZ 015814 for the rezoning to TC from R4.
Thank you very much. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, sir. All the reasonable consistency statement, or
What, is there any discussion on the motion?
any discussion on the motion?
You can vote on the motion.
A vote on the motion. Can I get all those in favor for the motion, please?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
And then you have to have your consistency statement for that one, too.
Yeah, you have to vote on it twice.
Can I get do I need approval, or just can I read it and then ask for approval?
You can read it and ask for approval.
Thank you. The request is consistent with the Waxhaw 2040 future land use plan and the comprehensive plan, specifically the goal of highlighting and protecting Waxhaw's historical heritage and encouraging adaptive reuse of historical residential buildings near downtown. It is reasonable and in the public interest as the parcel is adjacent to other TC zoned properties and will provide diversity to the tax base. May I please get a motion on the reasonable and consistency statement?
So moved.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item 6, rezoning petition RZ 015766. Lennon property. Blair, I believe you are presenting this evening. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Blair Israel, Senior Planner and GIS Manager, Town of Waxhaw. And yes, I'm here to present a rezoning petition for 109 Ethel Street. And this is petition number RZ 015766, 2024. It's a request by the applicants Derek and Robin Lennon for a rezoning map amendment of the parcel that you'll be looking at tonight. Here's a street view of it. And this is located at 109 Ethel Street, and the rezoning is from its current R3 residential zoning to neighborhood center. And the property is approximately 0.16 acres. It measures approximately 104 feet wide at the street and about 84 feet deep. It's located on Ethel Street between Old Providence Road and King Street, about 1 block from NC 75. So you can see that here on the map. You can see the mill, and uptown is just to, downtown is just to the left. And then coming down 75, continuing towards Old Providence, you'll see there the red X that indicates its location. And then on the aerial photo, you can see it there. Let's see, I'll just take us to the next slide so you can see our zoning. Current zoning shows that it is within the R3 neighborhood, but NC zoning is just across the street from it. There's a little bit of R4 to the west. So it is adjacent across the street from what's currently NC. But on the future land use plan, you can see the same street or its same location is within the brown continues along Old Providence Road, and that indicates mixed use. You'll see a red donut there. That's not a commercial red. That's just a symbol showing you where the property is. But you can see that what starts as downtown zoning along 75 gradually transitions into the mixed use zoning. Even though there's medium density residential, which is the yellow on either side. Eventually, heading further south, you would get to the low density residential. But you can see that the property is well within what's currently planned as mixed use, and there have been some rezoning south of it from R3 to mixed use. Just to go over real quickly what mixed use means here in our comprehensive plan, the 2040 comp plan, principal uses include things like smaller scale offices, neighborhood-oriented retail and services. It could include civic and institutional buildings, and it can include a wide variety of residential, but of no more than 8 units per acre. The purpose for this type of land use is to provide an alternative to automobile-oriented commercial centers. In other words, these would be walkable centers, but still a way to get to commercial needs from a walkable distance for the adjacent neighborhoods, particularly. These neighborhood centers are also intended to express the architectural identity of the town in its design. So the conditions here for this type of center to work are that they're at a neighborhood scale. They're nodes of this kind of mixed use and commercial activity within the residential areas. So the way of accomplishing that on the part of the town is to use the neighborhood center zoning. And so what you see here is our cut sheet from the Land Development Code that describes neighborhood center. You can see over to the left, lower left there of the slide, the buffer requirements. So if this property is to be rezoned, these are the buffer requirements that would be needed in between the NC and the R3. So that's the A class type, which means a 10-foot wide landscaped area having three trees, 20 shrubs per 100 feet. Excuse me while I get a drink of water. There's a lot of detail on that cut sheet, but basically the detailed description I've already gone over when talking about the mixed use. But I do want to describe more detail or drill into the details in the notes, because that's going to be particularly important when you consider property that's currently R3 and going to an NC zoning. So let's take a look at that. Excuse me. So for neighborhood center, non-residential buildings are allowed, but they shall not exceed the footprint of a 10,000 square foot building. Right now, the current building is a little over 500 square feet. Multifamily residential is allowed, but only on the second floor or above in NC district. Other residential uses must be part of a mixed-use development, and that has to be approved by a zoning administrator on a case-by-case basis. Strictly residential projects would be discouraged, and if proposed will require conditional zoning, so they would come through the planning board and, of course, the Board of Commissioners. Considering any single-family attached residential, the lot width can be no more than 60 feet. But I want you to take a look at whether, if there was to be duplex, triplex, or quadruplex desire to build that kind of thing, what that requires is that the development has to be 150% of the minimum lot width and depth standards. So what that would mean for this particular property is that the zoning width for a neighborhood center being 60 feet wide multiply that times 1.5, that means it would have to be a 90-foot wide lot. Now, in this case, that would work because the lot width is 104 feet. But when you consider the depth for NC zoning is 80 feet. Multiply that by 1.5, and that means 120 feet of depth if you're going to do duplex, triplex, quadruplex. And the depth here is only 84 feet. So in other words, all that to say that you couldn't do a duplex, triplex, or quadruplex. It doesn't allow that in this particular case for this smaller lot. The maximum residential density, however it might be done, shall not exceed 8 units per acre for all residential units. So I go through all that just so that you have some idea of, okay, if this is going to get zoned for neighborhood center, say somebody wants to come in and just do residential. These are all the hoops they'd have to go through and the restrictions that would be required. But again, neighborhood center is primarily for businesses or a mix of businesses and residential, and right now what's existing on the property is a business. Whoops, hit it too hard. So our consistency and reasonable statement, let me just read that real quickly. The rezoning request we're saying is consistent with the Waxhaw 2040 future land use map and is reasonable and in the public interest as the parcel is adjacent to other planned NC properties, as I showed you in the 2040 snippet of the map. Along with it, it's also along a major road corridor, and it will provide a diversity to the tax base. So the motion put forward is a favorable recommendation of the petition and a reasonableness and consistency statement as presented. So that's it for my presentation, but I'll be glad to take questions.
Thank you, Blair, for the presentation. We greatly appreciate it. I'd like to go ahead and open up the floor for questions.
I have a couple just newbie-type questions since I'm new to the board. If the building ended up being commercial on the first floor and apartments or residences on upper floors, I'm just wondering, the term duplex, triplex, and so forth, does it apply to those? If you've got, a continuous commercial building below, you have multiple residences above, are those considered duplex, triplex?
No, a duplex, triplex, quadruplex, those are strictly residential, single building. But yeah, what you're talking about would be, I guess you would have to consider it a multifamily residential, which is allowed, as you say, on the second floor.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
I'd like to go ahead and see if there's any other questions for Blair. Is there any comments from the applicant that they would like to make?
Unfortunately, they are not here tonight. I was not able to get in touch with them last minute.
Okay. I do have a question for you, Blair. Looking at our future land use map and how we discussed the adaptation of our 2040 comprehensive plan, in that corridor, I believe what we've discussed was to seeking rezoning on properties that were ideal and the ideal properties that would have frontage along Old Providence. This property would create essentially a donut hole that in the existing residents that are established here moving south, correct?
Are you talking about a donut hole in zoning?
In zoning.
Well, I have the zoning map up here.
Because the 2040 future vision map and our future land use map is a living document, correct?
It is to be revised on preferably a 5-year schedule. It can be 5 to 8 years or so. But it sounds like the concern is about that currently there's residential around it.
It's currently moving down into established residential.
Yes.
And moving further south past King Street. And that was originally estimated, but do we have pedestrian and road improvement overlays to prepare ourselves for those additional commercial activities further down Old Providence?
Yes, and a lot of these, some of these concerns were brought up when there was a similar rezoning
I did
on
talk
Arbor
about
Drive.
this when there was a rezoning across
Yeah.
the street from the elementary school. There was worries about pedestrian access, additional commercial activity, and how maybe that the plan needed to be taken a second look at from staff. I did mention that, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so do we have any additional road improvements and pedestrian improvements at this time?
There's an existing sidewalk that would be improved as development comes in. And one of those developments would be as the result of that recent rezoning to the property on Arbor Drive at Old Providence. So anywhere where you have that, the sidewalk, I know that there is existing sidewalk there, but it would be improved and brought up to standard as those developments occur.
So with that in mind, and our goal is to improve pedestrian walkability within our NC area, and this location is currently located on a small side street, not on the major thoroughfare. Is there any road improvements that they would be required to move pedestrian access?
So you're talking
to
about
the main road?
on Ethel Street itself?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this is a particular situation where it's close to Old Providence, but it is one lot inward.
Yes, but
And so it is Ethel Street doesn't have like a major sidewalk planned, but they would need to build sidewalk along the segment of the development. And that would also be true of any, as the NC properties are developed across the street from it.
So the Ethel Street, essentially, we would need to possibly take a look from an engineering perspective to make sure that we're coming up with proper setbacks along Ethel Street so we can make improvements to support that type of commercial activity.
The setbacks are part of the zoning, and I
The
think
setbacks are part of the zoning for this one?
absolutely setbacks are always part of the zoning.
Do we get easements to help support the sidewalks with this rezoning? I don't think we do, but that's why I'm asking to take a look at with an overlay to help with those things in our future.
So you can see the setbacks for NC zoning there in the dimensional standards. And as partly to answer your as part of the answer to your question too, there is a proposed crosswalk towards the school or at the school on Arbor Drive. So further down there is also that major
we talked
pedestrian
about
improvement.
There's a crosswalk there, but it needs some improvements. There's no rapid flashing beacon at this time. There's no light ped light plan up and down that sidewalk area past Pelican Snowball. Really, it kind of gets pretty dark.
I think I can ask James to weigh in on this.
Be happy
real quickly.
to. Love to hear any
Thanks.
additional information is always appreciated.
Yeah, so the town, I believe, has made requests that's a state-maintained road, Old Providence Road. So it's a difference between town versus NCDOT maintenance.
But Ethel is part of town.
So
right?
where are you requesting the RFB to be
Ethel
located?
to Old Providence. Is there any proposed improvements to help that area that has been historical residential, but now we're looking at expanding it? And not only are we expanding it in commercial, which would also drive our TIAs,
Right.
even our mini TIAs, but we need to start thinking about what kind of ped plans are these back streets going to have.
Yeah, that's a good point. So one thing that the town is working on now is part of a federally funded program. It's called Safe Streets and Roads for All. So that's part of a federal program that the town is utilizing to develop a implementation plan. We already have the pedestrian plan itself, which was recently updated in 2023. So that pedestrian plan outlines various ped improvements throughout the town. We need an implementation plan to apply for federal dollars. So the town is currently working through that now as a part of the bipartisan infrastructure law. And we are going to apply next year in the final round of applications, and that available funding is approximately $1 billion. So average awards have been ranging between $2.5 million to $25 million. Obviously, the town would be responsible for a 20% match, and that's something that we are just now starting through our task force implementation to develop that implementation plan to move toward getting those federally funded dollars.
Thank you, James. I appreciate the additional information.
Oh, one more thing. You asked about the RFB. So to clarify, we did originally send out a request to DOT. We can always follow up again. Since Old Providence is NCDOT maintained, it is an NCDOT decision on whether or not they would grant an encroachment for us to have an RFB at that location. I'll have to double check to see what the response was. I think it was no at the time. That can always be adjusted for more requests, and as the area becomes more developed, there may be more need throughout the course of time.
I would definitely encourage if there's any way to communicate, especially near our schools where our kids would be crossing, an RFB would be
As
highly
far as from a
desirable.
safety improvement, I agree with you there. It
Thank you.
provides a safe route to school.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions?
I want to take you back to just the existing conditions there. You can see the Lucy Rose Salon business that's currently in an R3 zone. And this is what they're asking to rezone to a zoning that can accommodate, is meant to accommodate businesses.
Any comments from neighbors on this rezoning? Was there any comments from neighbors that are being impacted with this rezoning?
None that have been made, no.
Anybody?
I think it's important for people to remember that we're going to be looking at this from a perspective of land use map, future land use map, excuse me. And it is reasonable and is consistent. The issue being it is tucked away in behind current residential homes. So it's difficult for us to, we wouldn't want to upset those folks. Now, there's a business already there, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's what I was just showing you.
They haven't been thrown out by their neighbors, or nobody's been
No,
picking it from
they're getting along really well.
Yeah, and so going forward, you turn that yellow area to brown, and more around there would be brown. So this is kind of like a domino. It's just difficult because it's all by itself.
It is. It's all by itself. It's unique, kind of displaced from any frontage on major thoroughfare, King Street or Old Providence. It's kind of on a side street, being Ethel. That is a little street. And so one of my things was just making sure, and again, it goes back to the questions of why I wanted to make sure that we're working towards not just now, but in the future, that we're trying to be comprehensive when we're evaluating these things and trying to address some of those needs. But I do agree.
It's a small domino.
Yeah, it fits our future vision, our future land use map, but we want to make sure that we're being mindful and good stewards of what challenges probably are going to be facing us as we keep moving down that corridor.
But for us as a planning board, we're looking at it from the future land use map, and then our board, the Board of Commissioners would.
That is their decision from there. Yes.
Well, just to remind everybody that the most recent rezoning that I did, that I led, was for this property here at the corner of Arbor Drive and Old Providence. And that was the same type of case. It was an R3 to an NC zoning. So this was adopted as NC. So you have currently NC zoning down here. And so it is going along with the intent of the future land use plan for NC to go down to this point, yes. Which is right across from the school. So just to give it some more context.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
My only concern is the side setbacks in this case where it is an interior.
I think it would be
It
would be non-conforming because of the already established house on the setbacks.
It's currently non-conforming, but it's a legal non-conformity right now.
Thank you.
This would bring it into conformity.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have one question.
Sure.
For commercial use, are there any guidelines for this size?
There's lots. I mean, it just depends on the type of use that it would have. I mean, it's currently classified as a haircutting salon type of use, and so there are certainly rules for that. But if you go through the land development code about any use that is acceptable within NC zoning, I mean, first of all, it narrows down the uses to what could be put in NC. It's not just any commercial use. You know, there are specific uses, but it's still a broad list. And some of those are a special use, so they would have particular requirements to help them fit in better. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, I guess you didn't answer.
Sorry?
We can reference those codes when time comes.
I'm sorry?
No, I got your answer.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good.
I have a question, Blair. So how about when it gets rezoned to be NC, about the parking, and especially the 88 type of parking?
Yeah, they actually in its current use, because it's a business and it is ADA compliant, so you can see, I mean, right now it's mostly a gravel lot. And so that's, you know, they are like I said, a legal nonconformity. They are meeting ADA requirements for this type of business. Now, as far as parking goes, I mean, right now, a lot of that lot is just gravel. There's actually a lot of parking in there for this small use. But of course, as was brought out in the last case here, you know, parking is dependent upon the type of use, and this is not. We're not selecting a use tonight. We're only selecting a zoning.
In general zoning.
You know, it's going to vary.
James, do you mind coming back up here for 2 minutes, please? I do have an Ethel parking, and specifically retaining to street parking on Ethel. Because I can see how street parking quickly can become a nuisance for some of those residential neighbors as that parking lot fills up. Can we look at and evaluate if that plan, if this plan does move forward, be mindful of watching to making sure that Ethel is not being blocked with access with street parking? Yes. Is there any preemptive activity we could take?
So, yeah, so it sounds like you are looking at not wanting to have on-street parking in
I
that
would say
area?
that it would be reasonable to have the first 15 feet to 20 feet of Ethel and Old Providence not be parking for line of sight reasons and safety reasons.
I believe that's already an ordinance now, so...
Does it marked? Is there a sign out there? I think because...
Oh, so you're looking for a sign? We can definitely mark it. We've done that before. I know there is an ordinance already within 25 feet of the intersection. You're not supposed to be parking within that vicinity. Yeah, but if you're looking for a sign, that's something we can definitely look into. From my firsthand
experience, as these commercial infills come, because I have one at the front of my neighborhood on
Red Oaks.
Red Oaks Trail. Yep. They don't care.
They don't care.
They don't care. They don't care. They will park. They will park there so they can get out and do their activity, and and they don't care if there's any residential.
We've recently acquired some no parking signs for that purpose, and they're being put in as kind of an as needed basis. I mean, even though we have some general laws, you know, that would apply to the whole town, there are specific cases where people really need a reminder, and so we have recently put in some of those signs and can always order more as needed. Something that seemed reasonable to at least take a look at.
Yeah, absolutely. And then another thing that we also have already implemented in other locations as well is a no parking ordinance, like on-street parking. So that's something that you could explore as well. Yeah.
Thank you, James.
Thanks, James.
I think we're at a point where we can move forward with a motion. Thank you for the conversation on this topic and this property rezone.
Absolutely. I'm sure you're getting tired of hearing me coughing too. So
I would like to just, this is a general comment, not specific to this decision, but reflecting some of the questions that y'all asked. Would it be possible in future briefing packets to include an overlay of what the pedestrian improvements planned, you know, what the as is and what the planned improvements already on the books are? I think that would really help me get a picture of.
I know I've asked for it in the past, and I would like to second that. if that is possible, that's helpful.
Absolutely, it's very much possible, and I just need to update my template and make sure that presentations from now on will have a slide or two specifically about that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions on this petition for rezoning? I'd like to go ahead and then open it up for a motion on RZ 015766.
I make a motion for a favorable recommendation for petition RZ 015766-2024. Based on the rezoning request is consistent with the Waxhaw 2040 future use map and is reasonable and in the public's best interest, as the parcel is adjacent to other planned NC properties along a major road corridor, and it will provide diversity to the tax base.
I'll second that.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Moving forward to conditional rezoning CD 0072024, Brindley. Madison will be presenting this evening. Thank you. Thank you, Madison.
I apologize. I'm running the presentations along with presenting, so I'm bringing everything up here with me. All right, good evening, everyone. I am Madison Miller, Assistant Planning Director for the town of Waxhaw. I am bringing before you tonight Brindley a conditional rezoning request. This is a petition by the applicant, CH Consulting, for the annexation and conditional zoning of 4.52 acres located along Waxhaw Marvin Road. It is located just west of the existing Grove Manor subdivision, and this proposed development will contain up to 13 single-family detached homes. To get you oriented with the site, you can see the parcel outlined in red, looks like a triangle, located on Waxhaw Marvin Road. The development to the north is Grove Manor, Phase 1 and 2, along with existing Union County RA20. To the south are existing single-family residential lots zoned R3, and then to the west is the Millbridge subdivision, also zoned R3. So this is the site plan. The proposed zoning plan will allow for 13 single-family detached homes. The applicant is requesting R4 single-family residential zoning. And then after the right-of-way dedication, the proposed density is 3.23 units per acre. So as a part of our Waxhaw Marvin corridor plan, it calls for a 10-foot multi-use path, and then also additional right-of-way dedication for a future 3-lane section for all of Waxhaw Marvin Road. So you can see the 10-foot multi-use path along the frontage of Waxhaw Marvin, along with their dedicating almost half an acre of right-of-way for this future corridor plan that the town will implement. So you can see the 13 single-family detached homes and their lot locations. Everything denoted in green is the common open space and tree save areas. And then I'll go over some additional parameters as I go deeper into my presentation. So with a proposed unit count of 13 units, the town's TIA ordinance was not tripped and a transportation impact analysis was not completed. In addition, there is not a requirement of a connectivity ratio of 1.4, and you'll notice a trend in this development. Most developments we see are 20 or 25 units or greater, and this is below that threshold. So developments containing a total of 25 or more residential units are required to dedicate a minimum of 15% of their interior site as publicly accessible recreation space. So again, with 13 units, this open space requirement is not required. But however, for all major subdivisions, we require a land dedication or a fee in lieu. This is our parkland dedication or fee in lieu that you guys have started to get familiar with. So if they were to do the dedication, they would be required to dedicate 0.43 acres. The applicant wishes to pay a fee in lieu instead of the land dedication, so the current tax value would amount in a $13,728.61 check to the town for future recreational purposes. So developments with 25 or more residential units are required to have a undisturbed 25-foot perimeter buffer. So again, with 13 units, this standard is not required. However, the applicant is proposing a 30-foot undisturbed buffer to maintain trees and buffers from adjoining neighborhoods on the west side and then an adjoining neighbor on the south side. And then so for proposed developments, they're required to preserve 30% of their existing tree canopy, totaling 1.356 acres. The applicant is proposing 1.97 acres, totaling 48.88% of the site. In addition, as a comment from our urban forester, they are going to be placing their common open space areas in a permanent conservation easement to ensure that that land is protected and maintained by their HOA. Here are the elevations for the proposed development. In addition, they're required to meet our Land Development Code Chapter 6 design standards as a part of this conditional rezoning. So the applicant held a neighborhood meeting on September 26. Notices went to all adjacent property owners within 300 feet, and a sign was placed on the property along Waxhaw Marvin Road. Their notification letter, meeting report, and sign elevations are in your packet. So as we are required by state law, when zoning is undertaken in accordance with a comprehensive plan, a consistency statement is required. So our Waxhaw 2040 comprehensive plan designates this area as medium density residential. So that allows for 3 to 4 units per acre and then 8 units for cottages. And so this provides for a mixture of housing, including detached, single family, townhomes, and in some cases duplexes and triplexes. And so this density is traditional and consistent with those surrounding it. And so for conditions for this area, have ready access to transportation and utility infrastructure to support larger scale and more intense urban design patterns. So since this property is currently in the county's 2050 comprehensive plan designates this area as a transition zone. So these are areas that are typically surrounded by one or more municipalities in which they will not approve any rezoning or changes to the zoning. So they typically ask that parcels like this come into the towns that they're located near for annexation and or rezoning. So I have a land use plan consistency statement for you, and then also a recommendation as one of your requested actions. And so along with proposed conditions from the applicant and then conditions from the town, there are 7 conditions that we have on the site. Condition number 1 is a reduction of the minimum lot width to 40 feet, reduction of minimum lot depth to 100 feet, reduction of the minimum side setback to 5 feet for the side, and then for the corner it would be 10 feet. Their minimum tree save of 30 feet on the western and southern property boundary, and single family attached dwellings or townhomes are not permitted in this development. Any areas in the common open space that are disturbed shall be replanted in coordination with us and the Union County Urban Forester. And then the developer or HOA shall be responsible for the maintenance of the street trees that are installed by the developer. And then the next requested action would be your consistency statement. And as always, if there's any questions, in addition, the applicant is here as well, and they have a presentation, so I can either bounce to them for them to give their quick presentation, or if you have a few questions for me, we can do either or.
I do have a question for you, Madison.
Of course.
I'd like to go ahead and take a look, go back to the overview. I believe it's slide 2 with the lot outline.
This one?
Yes, sir. Yes, thank you. Taking a look at this lot line and this parcel, one of my concerns is, one, I was looking at the elevation callouts from the front and how it slopes very quickly down back towards the, for the residents listening, it'd be like the south side of this map here, to where there's a larger established home, and then it backs up to the Millbridge community. One of my worries is the additional impervious surface will be in the location of this lot with the gradient of this lot. Can we discuss, or I know we might not have engineering here, but there's no BMP. There's no water retention, even though that this is close to 70% impervious surface with this residential development.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I will touch base on it, and then I'll ask Mason to come up here as well. So they're going to be applying under North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality for a low density development. So that would require impervious surface of less than 25%, 24%. And so they are going in for a low density. Now that they will be required to do water retention as required by our stormwater ordinance. But as a part of that, that will be HOA and deed restricted to ensure that additional impervious doesn't go over that threshold, because DEQ allows for lower density residential development in such a way that doesn't necessarily require ponds, but they'll do swells, and they'll make sure that conditions as they are now are met to where there's not off-site stormwater runoff. And that's a requirement of our own stormwater ordinance.
Okay, so they're applying. Have they been approved by DEQ?
No, this is pretty early on. Yeah.
Is this conditional portion inputted in as if they do not pass DEQ, does it revert back to the original zoning?
Well,
because it's dependent upon DEQ if they do or do not have the BMP, correct?
Well, so as long as they stay under the threshold, they would meet that requirement.
But it's still, they don't have that approval at this time for this rezoning application?
No, I do not believe so.
Okay.
No, now I know they probably have had preliminary conversations with DEQ, and they're doing that well in advance. I will say for most conditional zoning applications at this point have either had brief conversations or have not had conversations with a lot of outside agency approvals, including DOT, DEQ. They probably had some conversations with Union County Public Works because they're having to get a sewer easement from Millbridge. So they've already usually ahead of the game for most conditional zoning requests at this point.
Do we have comments back, even though it's a small amount of units? Do we have we do have an ordinance now, I believe that this was adopted in August, where we can now enhance communications with Union County Public Schools to see what kind of impacts this will be driving. Have we communicated, and do we have feedback?
So are you referring to the text amendment to require that all major developments, we send notification to the Union County Public Schools?
Yes, sir.
So interestingly enough, that's going to be one of the text amendments that we're going to have to bring back and repeal from our ordinance.
But it's currently in place?
Well, so Senate Bill 382 was in effect as of January 1. And so that requires, and it backdates to June 14th. So any ordinance or any text amendment that we've adopted since June 14 of 2024, the state is requiring us to add back the original text, because in a sense, us reaching out to the school systems and having them dedicate land for a school is a reduction in density. So our state legislator has passed a new Senate bill which takes a lot of authority away from the towns and other municipalities. That also includes our cluster provision that we removed, so that is also going to be added back into our ordinance. Again, effective as of January 1.
Effective as of January 1. So this is not a municipality, this is not a county, this is the state essentially requiring us to increase density.
Yep, so in the Hurricane Helene relief bill, if you guys heard about that in the news, this is one of the wonderful facets of local, or I guess state control that was added into that bill. So, so we're also learning with it as well, because its effective date is immediate upon its passing. And so now a lot of jurisdictions adopted brand new ordinances within the last 6 months, and so they're having to repeal and replace back to their old.
Okay.
Yep. And giving a little shout out, if you're going to watch our board retreat that's coming up, I believe Cindy is giving a brief presentation on this. Again, it's January 1, so it's been 20 days since this has been fully enacted.
Got it. Okay.
Yep.
So the state has taken away a tool in our, to be able to help our citizens and facilitate conversation with our county partners.
Now, that will say that the Union County Public Schools had a planner that was working for them, and that was present at our last board retreat. She has since left, and I don't believe they've either replaced her position or have engaged in additional conversation.
Got it. So we don't even have a communication point of contact with our county at this time.
She departed sometime, and then a temporary person was coming in who was, I think, retiring, and then communication with him has also died back significantly.
How does this proposed, when evaluating the established neighborhoods on the density of 3.2 units an acre, compare?
Yeah, so before the right-of-way dedication of 0.49 acres, their density was about 2.87 units per acre. So that's pretty consistent, if not maybe slightly higher than those around us. I believe Grove Manor and Millbridge are hovering around 2.5 to 2.6.
Question for you to follow up on that. What would the density be without the setbacks it gives to make this project work?
Yeah, so that would greatly impact the density of this because they're going below. Again, one of the reasons for the conditional zoning was one, they're requesting R4. So I believe with the R4, we wanted to see a site plan to make it site specific, but the reduction of the setbacks and or side setbacks specifically, and then the reduction of lot size would have an impact on the development if that was not part of this conditional zoning request.
So the town, to make this development at its current density, is giving up how much percentage of setbacks? 20%, 25%?
So the lot width was reduced by 20 feet and the lot depth was reduced by 5 feet. So you're losing the 20 feet for each lot in the width.
The width. So it's really the width of the lots that to actually be truly conforming to our setback requirements to make R4 work. They were given quite a bit to make that.
Yeah, they were giving some, again, that's part of this conditional zoning request. That was one of some of their conditions which they're allowed to propose, and I think us proposing some back in addition. For example, the no attached products, making sure there's enough tree save and common open spaces areas are replanted, and then the conservation easement that they're working through as well.
Any identified heritage trees?
There are no heritage trees on site.
Thank you. Any comment back from the county? Was comment sought from the county on this rezoning?
Which department?
It would be, I guess, Union County Planning and Zoning.
So they typically steer most people in our direction. They're very much so about having it come through our process and our jurisdiction.
And it's currently in the county at R20?
RA20.
RA20.
Yep. And so that allows...
Ag 20?
Do what?
For ag?
Residential agriculture 20, yes. But I think the primary use for RA 20 is manufactured homes. You can do duplexes, single family.
Is there any manufactured homes currently on property?
Not on this one, but the property across the street is zoned RA 20, and there is a manufactured home on it.
Oh, was that once adjoining that you know of?
I believe they were maybe the same ownership at one point, or are currently the same ownership.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And I believe in the applicant presentation, they can talk about Union County specifics for developments as well, because I know this kind of comes up often where, you know, county zoning versus our zoning.
Any comments back from neighbors?
No, so we will be putting together the notices this week to ensure that they are ready in preparation for the February 11th public hearing. And so that's when we'll send out the notices for 300 feet. We'll also notify all HOAs. So that'd be the Grove Manor HOA and the Millbridge HOA.
I thought that was supposed to be done on a conditional rezoning before it comes to the planning board for consideration.
No, so that's for the neighborhood meeting, and the applicant hosted the neighborhood meeting before submitting their application to us. And so they also notified property owners within 300 feet of the parcel.
How does that work? Are we essentially allowing them, even though they didn't submit an application prior to conforming to our meeting requirements?
Yeah, so we require that they host a
that?
neighborhood meeting before submitting any application to us.
Okay.
So so they're able to provide input and make modifications as needed, rather than already being 2 steps in the process and then getting feedback and having to backtrack and correct their plan.
Perfect, thank you.
Of course. Are you ready for the applicant to present? Is this now appropriate time?
I believe so, yes, thank you.
Okay. You guys are up. And then left, right, and if you need the pointer, it's right there in the center.
You're right.
All right, good evening, everybody. Appreciate your time tonight. Daniel and Deepa, congratulations on the recent appointment. So I know that's exciting news. So just going to take a few minutes just to talk about the process and how we arrived at this specific site. Just to introduce myself, my name is Chris Hansen. I've been a resident of Waxhaw since 1996. I've been in the development industry for about 15 years, and I am an owner of this site, or pardon me, I'm not just a third-party consultant, so I'll be purchasing the site and developing it. With me is Mason Greason with CEC to answer any additional questions specific to engineering. So want to just kind of talk through some of the by right uses. This is truly a donut hole. I mean, everything surrounding this site is in Waxhaw. So this is currently zoned Union County RA 20. And as we develop our site, we try to establish, hey, what can we do in Union County, and really what's the best fit for the site if we're able to work with Waxhaw. So as mentioned, the uses available from a residential standpoint are single family, they call 2-home units or duplex style manufactured housing. And there's several non-residential uses which is allowed by right as well. It's worth mentioning that, you know, we're not the first ones to have this property under contract. Previous folks who had this under contract were looking to work directly with Union County and not necessarily go through this annexation process and conditional rezoning process. Want to just kind of share one of the initial sketches we did to demonstrate kind of another option for the site. And this is a Union County specific site plan which has essentially 10 townhome units or duplex units. They require larger lot sizes, but you can, again, do a duplex style. And I bring it up because, you know, again, as we were looking at the site, and Daniel kind of shared your concerns, if we were trying to reduce as much infrastructure as possible, specifically stormwater, and a lot of the site, when we were bringing up, was really inspired by the new conservation design that you had came up with. So right away, our goal was how do we save 50% of the site? Because again, every other option essentially involves wiping out the site, you know, going by right. You know, right away, we really like the idea of putting that tree save in a conservation easement. When we met with many of the neighbors in Millbridge and Grove Manor, that was pretty important to them as well. They did not want to see this site just wiped out. Again, minimizing infrastructure on the site, going low density, reducing the amount of impervious, again, certainly just, you know, ensures that we're not going to be creating a lot of additional stormwater to the neighbors. With Millbridge specifically, there's already a 30-foot tree buffer behind those residents, so we want to double that. So we want to make sure we had an additional 30 feet, so those folks who have a nice wooded backyard, they'll still have that, when we're done with the site. Kind of speaking, Madison brought up earlier, but the DUA, we really kind of want to match the look and feel of Grove Manor so it didn't look out of place as you're driving down Waxhaw Marvin. So our DUA was actually a bit less than what would be where Grove Manor is currently. Grove Manor is at 2.95. We're at 2.85. Madison mentioned there's some dedication that we're gonna do, which is gonna kind of bring that number up, but it is pretty much in line with the with Grove Manor across the street. Certainly only allow single-family detached. That was also another important piece when we spoke with the residents. They didn't want to see any additional uses but single-family on the site. And of course, there's architectural standards we want to provide. Waxhaw certainly has higher standards really for everything from a development standpoint than what Union County currently has, and really just minimize the entrance, just one cul-de-sac in, just to make sure that you have the best sight line, and we're looking to minimize any traffic concerns. So again, you guys know the drill in terms of the advantage of working with with a developer through the conditional rezoning versus going directly with Union County. I'll just run through these, really just scroll through these. But I think one of the things that was pretty important was on Waxhaw Marvin, obviously there's a new Waxhaw Marvin corridor study. And one of the feedbacks that we had from the community meeting was let's add some sidewalks. So when we presented the site to staff, we had a sidewalk along Waxhaw Marvin. And ultimately they need that, that 10-foot multi-use path is now a requirement. So certainly happy to add that to the site, as well as provide additional right-of-way for future widening of Waxhaw Marvin. Again, I think that's a pretty important benefit, so that if we were to run through Union County, those things would not be in place. A few elevation examples that again Madison already brought up, but again, only vinyl will be allowed, say in soffit areas. Architectural shingles, carriage style garage doors. These will be fully sodded lawns, professional landscapes. These are starting to be HOA controlled neighborhood. And again, there'll be restrictions on additional impervious to address those stormwater concerns. And then just kind of finally, I think I sent the wrong one, but I did want to just talk briefly about the community meeting that we did have, and specifically feedback from the neighbors. We had a brief presentation with the residents, primarily of, again, Millbridge and Grove Manor. And after that, I talked about 90 minutes, just kind of answering a lot of questions, and really spoke through the process of the conditional zoning. And I think no one wants to have a new neighborhood in the backyard, but they were certainly appreciative of us preserving the site, certainly preserving the additional 30-foot buffer for the site. I think knowing that once it's, if it gets passed, that is what it's going to be, that no one else can go in the future and change the site. And certainly knowing that we're going to work with Waxhaw versus just go directly with the county. So obviously traffic concerns are kind of always come up when you're talking with neighbors. And we've addressed that, show them kind of the minimal impact of how many counts and how many trip generations the site would produce. And also, with benefit of adding that multi-use path, we'll have some additional clearing, so any sightline concerns were addressed as well. So, I think all in all, it was a very positive meeting. I hope that many of those residents can attend the actual public hearing and speak on our behalf. But again, they're just pleased to see a site that, again, preserves the site and doesn't just clear it out and clear out their backyard. So, but yeah, that's really all I had. So, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Does anybody have any questions for the applicant at this time?
I have a couple.
Rick, please.
Yeah, on the graph, or the high-level site plan that you had, it showed the green area surrounding the 13 homes. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding correctly. So the green area will be untouched. When you say tree save area, you're not doing any clear cutting in that green area?
Correct. I'll need to go to the. Can you bring up the actual site?
Of course.
You've answered the question.
That was the primary goal, was just to not touch that. So we'll have established clearing limits. We're only going to clear what we need. And the rest will be, again, it's part of the conditions that area will be preserved and putting that, conservation needs and so forth.
Okay.
And I think just to add, the option to go to fee in lieu for the park space. Again, the residents didn't want to see a park here. They didn't want to see additional land taken up for that. So that's why we decided to go the fee in lieu play.
Okay. My other question is, not specific to you, but again, I'm a newbie, so this is really my first deep dive into any proposal. And I just found that when I was reading the notes from the developer meeting, there are a lot of non-factual statements. Residents were satisfied, with the answers provided as a statement in the summary notes.
Sure.
I'm just wondering, is there any on the town side? Is there any obligation or opportunity to sort of share the entire transcript or share an opposing view of what the temperature in the room was, or is it recorded and preserved so people can go back and watch the meeting? Go ahead.
No, for this particular meeting, it wasn't recorded.
Okay.
There are specific guidelines that we had to follow in terms of notice requirements and such.
And that's not one of them.
So, but I will, and again, I can reach out to many of the folks that attended, who I still communicate with. I email anytime we have an update on when the planning board meeting is going to happen or when the vote's going to happen. I would say the general consensus was no one wants a development in their backyard. But they're happy to know that this is what it's going to be, versus every other option that's been put beforehand, which is, again, is clearing the site. So, I spoke to many of the residents that are really directly impacted who back up to the site, and I will say that, again, they were pleased with the effort that we're taking to place the additional buffers, and again, not wipe the site. So that's many times you don't kind of see that effort put in, but. Again, I live here. I see a lot of these folks. I don't want to get the stink eye when I'm grabbing ice cream in downtown Waxhaw. So,
right.
We try to, have the trade-off, of we can get a couple more units here going through Waxhaw, which is important to us. But in return, obviously we'll do a lot to help our neighbors in the town of Waxhaw. So
Appreciate that.
From a traffic standpoint, people can get. From a traffic standpoint, people can get pretty fast going down Waxhaw Marvin Road. And I noticed, I think Grove Manor does have there's a middle turn or a lane for turning there.
Yes.
For this entrance, that is continued in front of this entrance, or is that?
Are you going to? Are you middle center divider?
Yeah.
Yeah. James, I think that might be your area of expertise, but
I noticed there wasn't
we're trying to see if there's enough easement right away to make sure that the center divider, so left-hand turn lanes, can be safely made out of the residence.
Yeah, so that Waxhaw Marvin is a DOT-maintained road, so they will have to go through the driveway permitting process with NCDOT.
Do they have one?
That is too early in the process for that right now. Eventually, they must obtain a driveway access permit from the Department of Transportation, and any access requirements would be determined by them since it's a state roadway.
Okay. So another aspect in a purview that we're a little bit blind on because of NCDOT.
Yeah, so this one with NCDOT roadways, it is their jurisdiction for those improvements. There are general statutes as far as the powers of the Department of Transportation, which are outlined within General Statute 136.18. For a site this size, I don't expect DOT to require any left turn mitigations. For example, 136.18 subsection 29, for any roadways that are greater than 4,000 vehicles per day, DOT can require acceleration or deceleration lanes as a part of the driveway permitting process. I don't anticipate that they will. And as far as access requirements for a site like this, it's really a DOT decision.
Okay.
Yeah.
Before you go, two questions on the interior road. The interior road U-turn bubble is to our current standards similar to the Millbridge's U-turn bubbles or larger?
Yeah, so we have set standards for that. I would have to actually look to see what is providing as far as, like, I'm assuming you're referring to like the radius or diameter?
Yes, because
To meet
what
those
I'm
requirements.
getting to is you take a very small street, you take a large dense populace of houses, 13 units, you add 3 or 4 cars per family household, you have on-street parking, and you have an emergency response possibility that may be hampered. So my request is the applicant consider either restricting parking on one side, and then my request for the town is on such an area, such a small thumbprint, I don't believe that it's in our best interest to possibly annex that road, and I believe it possibly should be upkept by the HOA.
By upkept by the HOA, you're referring to the internal street and the cul-de-sac,
Yep,
correct?
that little, and unless we're adopting that road into our town.
So I'm not sure if that's something, because that's part of
That's part
public
of-
utilities
that's
as
part-
well.
okay.
The applicant could always petition the state, NCDOT that is, for road addition, make it a state-maintained roadway. That is possible. As far as from a private side, I would assume that Union County or public utilities would have some concerns there from a private access standpoint. Yeah.
Wouldn't that private access, though, be similar to any other gated community, such as Providence Down, like down the street?
Well, for public utilities, it all depends upon the easements, and that's a Union County question.
Okay.
For this, if you do not wish for it to be a town-maintained road, that's something that the applicant could explore with NCDOT through their road addition process.
Okay. I just see this is a very small thumbprint of a road on a very private little community that's going to be HOA maintained, and correct me if I'm wrong, 200 yards, 200 meters of roadage into that U-turn bubble.
I don't know exactly what it is. Again, the applicant would also.
400 to 500 feet.
So that seems like a fairly small private maintained HOA road to me, not a municipality maintained piece of road. That's mainly meant for those 13 possible residents for their services. I would just question at that point, are we doing the public service, and what's our cost to serve at that point to help these 13 units?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I'm wondering if that's something that the applicant would be willing to explore with DOT, is a petition for road addition. With that said, though, DOT, if that were to be moved forward, the town would likely still have to maintain the sidewalks. And that would be done via encroachment.
So sidewalks would be done in encroachment. Would we have to do sidewalks to a certain extent, and can be the interior sidewalks be part of the HOA?
Yes, so DOT wouldn't maintain sidewalks, period.
But the HOA could.
The HOA
So we can
could
maintain
if there's
the
an
first
agreement
50
in
feet.
place.
I'm just picking a number.
One thing to keep in mind, though, is that sidewalks are generally considered public use, so it's assumed that the municipalities would maintain sidewalks. So that's something you'd want to clarify within the language, and maybe Cindy can add on to that. But that's just something for consideration as well. Is that it's likely that given the public use of that sidewalk, that it's expected that the municipality maintain the sidewalk.
But they're maintaining the street trees themselves already, right?
It depends upon where the street trees are located. So that's another thing. If the street trees are located within the right-of-way, then that would be a municipality.
So then question, we have current problems in Millbridge where the street trees are currently causing consecutive issues on the sidewalks. Would we be then responsible to grind, repair, and replace for sidewalks?
That is correct. And one thing to consider also is the species of street trees. So you can look into variations of that. Obviously, a smaller growing species would have less likely of that uprooting to occur, as well as looking at the planting strip widths, as long as that's still able to be achieved within the right-of-way.
You couldn't have too big of a tree there because the canopy would be a major issue. They'd be running into each other after about 3 years.
It would. Madison, on this current application, even though I know we are looking at it as a conditional application, some of that material was not available in a site plan for review that I could see. Is there something that you could elaborate on a little closer?
Material as far as tree species, planting strip, all that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I believe they were showing a 7-foot planting strip, and then their tree species. So what you run into with like Curitan and Millbridge is that they have a 3-foot planting strip, and then they have a large willow oak, which is one of the faster, more native trees of North Carolina, so that's where you run into that issue. Our standard is now 7 feet, and we're more selective of our tree species list. We typically ask not to have willow oaks and or red maples. So red maples are notorious for having surface level roots, and that's what eats away at your sidewalk. So we look at that in more detail, and so I think they showed trees here just as a placeholder, but we would ensure that it's likely a medium maturing tree and not a large fast growing.
Do we need to write that in as a condition with part of staff?
I think we typically handle it at staff level, but if you want that to be a condition, you can lump that into one of the conditions as long as the applicant is amendable to that.
The applicant's smart enough not to put those huge trees in the tree strip.
Yeah.
One more thing to consider is if you move away from a town-maintained roadway and move toward an NCDOT roadway, NCDOT recently updated their policy to not permit street trees within the right-of-way, so that's just something else to tack on as far as an additional layer, is that if it were to be a state-maintained roadway, then those trees would have to be located outside of the right-of-way.
Thank you. Appreciate it, James.
Okay, so that was a lot. So I guess from you guys as the applicant, would you guys look into NCDOT accepting maintenance of the road, or is that something you guys would consider at least diving into?
Yeah, I think certainly we'll look into that, but a lot of times in many of the municipalities that we work with, private streets are not allowed, and certainly working with NCDOT, it can sometimes be challenging just to work through that process. But I'm certainly open to it. But again, I don't want to complicate that process if it means now removing street trees and now adding additional setbacks, and then now we don't have 50% of the trees preserved. Now we're clearing more land. So I'd much obviously keep it where it's a town-maintained road where they maintain the sidewalks, and kind of go the least.
I hear you on that, and that does make sense. So I'm not trying to muddle the project, but I'm going to go back to my initial concern, and I'd like staff to maybe take a second look at this with engineering. I do have some DEQ concerns with that water retention because that's a lot of homes.
Sure.
Especially in that Millbridge area, because they did not have the same requirements. A lot of people built out patios really far, and there's a lot of runoff back there. And I don't know if you've done a study yet. To look at that. But I'm thinking it needs to be taken a second look at. And I'm kind of at a point to where I think we should table this so engineering can be here to comment on DEQ and water retention at this point.
Well, we'll say
continue.
Yeah.
Continue this so we can get feedback from our engineering team.
Well, and I can speak to that.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'll just sit down.
So our stormwater engineer, Orion, reviews based off of our own stormwater ordinance requirements. So he's more about the water quantity, and DEQ is more about the water quality. So that's two separate entities that are reviewing this project because we require a DEQ approval, but then we also ensure compliance with our own ordinance. So that ordinance is going to get met either way. And just trying to make that clear. And we do require a DEQ approval as well, because that's where they get the stormwater permit number from. So that's also part of our project approval requirements before they get approved construction documents, along with Union County Public Works, DEOT permits. So that's already part of our process.
But it's part of our process, but they're asking for DEQ to give them essentially a variance.
No, it's part of their
in the stormwater retention requirements, correct?
No.
No. Would you like to step up to the microphone and talk?
Yeah, with DEQ, obviously that is the permitting party for Waxhaw and for a majority of the state. As you know, Waxhaw is not an MS4 permitted municipality for their own review. It is written into your ordinance that we are going to address the tension and retention. We're obviously going to control our peak flows from the site. And I've run the numbers on it, gone through it with Orion, literally had to walk through the process, not with Orion, but DEQ. It is a standard policy. Post-construction controls ordinance for the state is the low density option or your high density option. There are no other options. We meet the low density option, and it's not even an option. Those are the requirements if we're less than 24% built upon area. We will be deed restricting every lot that is in that is a part of that permit. And when they issue that permit, each lot will have a deed restriction to it to the amount of impervious it can have in the future, forever.
So your HOA, and then it'll be deed restricted in addition to? How does that work for us, Cindy, with a deed restriction? Can you, on impervious surface? So if a private resident adds, let's go with 20 square feet of additional impervious surface because they poured a patio.
Correct. Or a pool.
Or pool, let's go with 100 square feet. How does that work, and what recourse would the town then have to investigate that?
Those impervious limits will be on the plat.
Correct.
So you'll see the impervious limits on the plat.
Yes, ma'am.
And those impervious limits will also be in the deed restrictions. So if the homeowner, for example, builds, not necessarily a pool because the surface of the pool is not considered impervious, but if the homeowner builds a shed or a deck off the back, well, let's say a shed, then the homeowner would be in violation of the deed restrictions.
A porch with an additional overhang, like a patio cover and structure?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
Because there's some exceptions to that, but it's hard to get into those at this point. There's some exceptions if the materials allow drainage to come through, and I'm not a stormwater engineer.
Correct. If it's a deck is allowed, obviously, because it drains through the
Right, the
deck.
deck
If it's
drains
covered, to your
through.
point, Daniel, then yes, that would be a violation. So it's also where the state would actually issue and control that issue is they would issue a notice of violation on the homeowner for that property because their lot is deed restricted. And when they purchase their home, it is stated on the plat, it is stated in on their deed, and that's how the state regulates it.
And believe me, the other homeowners know that.
Yeah.
And if one homeowner does that, they're going to report the other homeowner because they're going to say, well, I'm not allowed to do this, so why are you allowed to do this? I've seen that happen.
And just to give you a rough idea of the flows that we're talking about for a 4.5 acre site, really a 4 acre site, your pre-developed is about 5.5 cubic feet per second. It naturally drains into an existing storm drainage easement.
There's so there is
There is an existing sewer easement and storm drainage easement for Millbridge. So there's an existing pipe that is installed to this property currently that collects the runoff to this property and bypasses it through the system of Millbridge. So we're in our post-developed, again, while we're trying to keep that infrastructure so small, we're roughly looking around 7 or 8. So we're trying to control, when we talk about retention, detention, we're only trying to control about 3.5 CFS.
Does that, okay, 3.5 CFS. So does that stormwater system, when looking at it for flow control, does that have the capacity for what you're adding to what was scoped out by
Yes,
Millbridge?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And what percentage of capacity would your addition to raise it, like 80%, 90%, 100%?
Will we raise it to?
Yeah.
7 to 10%.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, there's an existing 30-inch pipe through that system right there because it's collecting the offsite.
Okay.
And passes it through. It is you don't necessarily see that all the time that it's already installed, but that was when Millbridge was approved, and Union County Water obviously makes you extend the easements to adjacent property owners that are landlocked.
That was my question because I live right there by the creek.
Yes, ma'am.
Where the cul-de-sac is. So my question was, to Daniel's point, if the engineering is already working, is there a chance that we could get to see the stormwater drainage proposed plan? And if that was already accounted for, because when I bought my lot by Creek View in the cul-de-sac, we were put on hold till the creek was designed to connect with the Catawba River, and we were not allowed to buy those lots yet. So my question is, I'm assuming because where this location is, it's coming straight to the same creek and connecting. So has that been already accounted for, is the question. And probably we would know that once we look at the stormwater drainage.
Yeah, so we run an analysis on, this is during the construction document process and with the state and with, with Orion through that process, that we would prove what the existing flows that are going through that existing system and what our increase of it. So we have to meet the full flow capacity of that system right now, and currently I think it's at 25% roughly of what's naturally draining through it, give or take, depending on the storm event. The requirement for the town is only a 10-year storm event. So that's in your stormwater ordinance of Chapter 9. So at this point,
That sounds a little low.
Yeah, I was just going to say that might have to be revisited. That seems a little low, a 10-year storm for stormwater maintenance. I'm just saying for future reference, not on your application.
So a 10-year storm is consistent with like a similar NCDOT subdivision manual. A 10-year storm is technically a 10% chance that a storm could occur in that given year. So a lot of people confuse the terminology there. DOT also looks at 25-year storms, but that's only if there's cross drainage involved. For the storm sewer collection, though, it is typically 10-year storm.
But we can take a look at our ordinance and see if there's any additionals that we can observe, correct?
We can take a look at the language that's within the ordinance.
Thank you.
But that couldn't apply to this project?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I know that this has no bearing. It's a note to staff that is maybe this needs to be taken a second look at. I don't know how long or how established that ordinance is, but as more impervious surface comes to our town and our creek systems, we probably need to be wise to that.
I believe you guys adopted that in 2020. Was the stormwater
Might be a
ordinance,
little
was the
older.
last revision.
Might be a little older than that.
Okay.
So, but
I think it was revised and adopted. Okay. It was in 2020.
Yeah, just from planning perspective, I just know if you go to a 25-year or 100-year storm, your stormwater ponds typically get larger, so then you lose the natural areas that were existing. And so this is like one of those big topics where planning and engineering don't agree, because we would rather have low impact development or have less impervious or large stormwater ponds. And so this is one of those interesting facets of our jobs that we see every day.
look forward to the discussion then.
Sure. So I guess the general direction on this is, are you still wanting to table it, or are you guys wanting to move forward with these
I was originally wanting
parameters?
to continue it to make sure that we heard from some engineering, but after hearing some of the capacity and that there's only about a 10% increase, the current state of the capacity of that 30-inch culvert is maybe only about 25%. So I believe that it was addressed. I don't remember a call out on that plat for that culvert, but I'm glad it was addressed and discussed.
Yes, while we bring our engineers, or at least Mason.
So appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome. And so I guess understanding for at least one of the conditions you discussed, ensuring the tree species is not too large for the planting strip, is that something you are still wanting to add?
I would say yes. I would want that language to be identified in the conditions.
Madison, do you have a list of those conditions that you could put on the screen in front of us?
The slot setback gives and all the other
This one?
conditions.
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't see it on the screen.
There we go. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, so this could be just condition number 8. The developer shall install appropriately sized trees for the planting strip, or it could be you limit it to a small or medium mature tree.
How about would the applicant agree to the condition to work with staff in limiting the street trees to be of medium size as per our list of conforming trees, specifically to avoid willow oaks, red oaks, and any other trees that may be of...
Red oaks or red maples?
I'm sorry, red maples. And any other trees that may be identified as of...
Past issues with the...
Yes, that we've had past easement issues.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we've learned our lesson with Millbridge and Curitan, so, especially Curitan. Okay, so that will be condition number 8.
I may have misread something, but I feel like there's another condition that would be consistent with your intent, but I didn't see it listed among those 7. And that is specifically calling out the 10-foot multi-use pathway and perhaps where it connects to the larger Waxhaw plan for
Yeah, so I think that is a requirement no ifs, ands, or buts.
Okay.
So we would make them do it either way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any homes that we've identified that actually, that this lot would come close to where it might need evergreen screening to provide additional buffer from the established residents?
There's
Right. I'm more thinking.
To the south?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So
It's all heavily wooded, so.
we could, so they have lot tree requirements, so we can ensure that if they want to place all their lot trees in the rear yard to add additional 3 trees per lot, we could make that a requirement.
At staff discretion, per the planning director, for final plat. I'm fine with
Sure.
that. I just wanted.
Do you want that to be a condition or just for us to handle?
You can handle it.
Okay.
I just wanted to bring it up because that is
Sure.
a little close on that south side, in my opinion. I don't
Yeah.
know I didn't shoot a line of distance, but
Yeah, I'm with you. Now bounce back to this one. So requested action.
anybody else have any comments?
So just let me make sure I understand. You're only adding one additional condition?
Correct.
Number 8? And
Yes.
the discussion about adding extra trees to the back of some of the lots, that's just something you're
zoning
asking.
administrator's discretion. Yeah, I'm fine
But you
with
don't
it.
want to add that as a condition?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
I'm not adding it as a condition. I'm just asking staff and the zoning administrator to take a second look at before final plat.
Sounds good to me.
Can I get a motion on, apologies, conditional rezoning CD 007-2024. This is a request, I'm sorry, with a modification to the proposed condition. Thank you.
I can make a motion.
Okay.
I can make a motion for the favorable recommendation for CD 007-2024 to the Board of Commissioners with modification to the proposed conditions by adding condition number 8.
Can I get a second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you very much. Appreciate the conversation on that. Look forward.
Got one more for you.
You got one more? Yes, sir. Moving on to consideration of text amendment. No.
Reasonableness and consistency statement.
Sorry, apologies.
And then 2 more text amendments after
And
that.
2 more text amendments. Can I get the reasonable consistency statement?
Could you pull it onto our screens?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. The plan is consistent with the 2040 comprehensive plan in that it has ready access to transportation and utility infrastructure to support the urban development. Patterns capable with the adjacent residential neighborhoods at a density of 3 to 4 dwelling units per acre. It is reasonable and in the public interest that the development connects non-contiguous areas through annexation with the same land use patterns as the surrounding area to ensure the town grows in an orderly manner. Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve that consistency
Second.
statement.
I can second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Now our text amendment, I believe it's TA 0172024, rooftop additions.
So this text amendment is a request by the Waxhaw Planning Department to amend our LDC to establish design standards for rooftop additions within the Waxhaw National Historic District. The purpose of the text amendment is to protect the historic character of the National Historic District while allowing downtown businesses to respond to the growing popularity of rooftop establishments. Staff is requesting to add the text below in red to section 6.62, roofs and eaves. It currently says rooftop additions shall meet all applicable state building standards and use railings or parapets that are consistent with the architectural style of the building. We want to add rooftop additions within the Waxhaw National Historic District shall follow the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation, ITS number 47, rooftop additions on mid-sized historic buildings, and National Park Service Preservation Brief number 14 for rooftop additions.
Janet,
Yes,
are rooftop additions currently permitted in our TC?
yes, they are.
They are. Okay. Do we have height restrictions in that area?
No. Well, height
Yeah.
restrictions in the
As in-
standards for the zoning
For the
district.
zoning, yeah.
Yes. Okay, but historical buildings don't have its own unique requirements and set of plans for height restrictions in this category.
They do not.
Okay.
Okay, help me, Madison. What did I do here? Oh, never mind. Got it. Okay, so the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitations, there are 10 standards. They are the 10 commandments of rehabilitation. The ones that apply for rooftop additions are number 2, the retention of historic character, number 5, the preservation of distinctive features, finishes, and craftsmanship, and number 9, compatible new additions and alterations. The interpreting the standards number 47 and preservation brief number 14 help to clarify the standards. They identify that the roof line is an important character-defining feature of a historic building. Rooftop additions must be carefully designed in order to preserve the building's historic character. A successful rooftop addition does not significantly impact the character of a historic building or district. Additions should be subordinate in size and design and compatible with massing, scale, materials, and features, and set back from the primary elevation of the building so that it is not highly visible from the public right-of-way. Anytime there is an addition on a historic structure, it should be placed so that it's not visible from the right-of-way.
What standard of visibility is it? The nearest public right-of-way, or so is the public right-of-way like across the street from NC 75? Looking at some of the historical buildings over there, like Blood Law, or in down that corridor. So if you're standing, say, at the base, not up on the platform for the historic bridge, but down on the bottom.
Down on the bottom. So,
Yes,
and within the right-of-way from the street.
But
So-
across the street, not the nearest curbage, but it would be at some distance.
At a distance and from any of the right-of-ways. So for the Blood Law building, if you were standing in the right-of-way behind that building, you shouldn't really be able to see it from there either.
Okay.
Let's see. So the reasonableness and consistency statement is that the text amendment request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and future planning goals of the town of Waxhaw. It's reasonable and in the public interest as it allows for economic growth while preserving the history and character of downtown Waxhaw. And then the requested motion is a favorable recommendation.
Question for you, Janet. On the rooftop additions, are they required to be enclosed or open when they do a rooftop addition, or can
There is not a requirement. It depends on the architect and what he plans.
Got it. Then if they're building a rooftop addition in a large portion of our historic buildings in that area that would probably qualify under this ordinance, have the large brick facade.
Mm-hmm.
Would they be required to carry that brick facade to that addition?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
A lot of it has red brick facade.
Yes,
Would they
so
be
they have brick parapets.
And would they be required to carry that addition?
I don't think
to
you
that?
want to, the idea is not to raise the parapet. So the skyline of Waxhaw is a character-defining feature of our historic downtown district.
Yes.
So you don't want to impact it by increasing the height of these parapets.
No.
Plus, you need to also look at this structural engineering and be sure that it can handle the weight of whatever's being proposed.
Yes, ma'am.
On the sides of the buildings, you may want to extend the parapets so that it's not visible. Depends on which building you're talking about, where it's located, and how much you can see from the right of way.
Yes, ma'am. But that's what I was curious on, is because to keep like there is quite a bit of brick used. So would they be permitted to then deviate from that brick look on that addition?
No, they need the brick.
Okay, so it has to stay brick.
Yes.
And so they would have to then structurally engineer that addition, that rooftop, to then have that load-bearing capabilities.
Yeah, anytime there's an addition like that, it has to go through a structural engineer, and that report has to be presented to the building inspector.
Does it have to go through the Historical Society for review at all?
It does not.
From a historical point of view?
It does not. Again,
Can we work on that?
Our historic district is a National Register district, so there are no design requirements that we can impose, or unless.
Can the planning board assist?
If we had a local historic district, then they would have to come to us for a certificate of appropriateness for any changes to the exterior of the building. We do not have that, so unless the building is a local landmark, which there are 4 in Waxhaw, or they come to us for a facade grant, because if we are granting a facade grant, we require them to go through our design standards, our downtown historic district design standards.
Thank you.
Jan, just out of curiosity, these additions make a lot of sense, and I'm just kind of curious, what was the genesis of adding them? Was there new laws that were passed, or did you have an incident, or why all of a sudden they're getting added? Because it seems to me they both should have been in place a long time ago.
Well, there were attempts for rooftop additions in the past. They didn't pass the structural engineer. We do have another one that's being proposed, and the Historic Preservation Commission wants to preserve downtown the way it is. And because we don't have any standards right now that regulate rooftop additions in downtown, we decided to do this through the Land Development Code, because then it's required to be followed. If we put it in our design guidelines for our historic district, those are only required to be followed if it's a local landmark or if they apply for a facade grant.
So basically what you're saying is, up to this point, there's not been a whole lot of discussion about rooftops and changing them, but
Yes.
now there's more discussion. So now you're trying to preemptively put this in there, so there's a lot more discussions about that. Okay,
Yes.
that makes sense.
You want to go? I just wanted to make sure I understood exactly, because I didn't take this from the reading that I did. When you said that when a parapet is required, you're also saying it is required to be brick, or it's required to be the same material that the existing roof line is? Or?
It would be required to be the same material that the roof line is. In the historic district, it's pretty much all brick.
Okay. So every building in the historic district has a brick facade today?
All the commercial ones along Main Street, yes. I mean, there are residential buildings in our historic district as well.
Okay.
And who would approve that? Who would confirm that before they go ahead and build it? Will that be?
It would come through the planning department.
Planning department. Will our historic department also have a say in it?
Only if it is a landmark or they require a facade grant.
Okay.
That's why I wanted this in the LDC and not as part of our I mean, we'll have that in the historic guidelines too, but we need it in the LDC for it to really have any teeth.
Just a question to the board here. What would prevent, or would anything prevent the board from adopting a process by which we ask the Waxhaw historic folks for their opinion on the aesthetics and the things like
Right.
you were saying?
Yeah.
So even if it's not required.
Add
by
a step
ordinance- Right.
in the process of approval, yeah.
Right.
The only thing is, I don't think that we can make that as a part of the condition for review and for approval. But what we can do is, if things do come, we can coordinate through Janet with the Historical Society so public comment can be put into the agenda on that item, possibly.
Maybe you could help with this, because the HPC
Yeah.
is a statutory board, and their permitted oversight is on historic structures, landmarks. I don't know that they would have any say.
I don't know that they would either, but let's do this. I understand your concerns. Let Janet and I talk about it. Let us research state statute to see what might be allowed, and get back with you on
I'm also
that.
just trying to see to where we can find a way to open communication on those type of items. And how can we interwork together between the Historical Society and the Planning Board? Does that make sense?
When things like this do come, as the liaison to the HPC, I usually mention it in my staff update at the Historic Preservation Commission meeting. But again, they don't have jurisdiction over any of it. It's more just kind of informational.
I agree with Janet.
Okay.
They don't have any authority to say yes or no. She's just giving them information about what they're doing.
Okay. Well, based off of the way I'm reading it currently, it's an outline of additional tools for our planning board, our staff, and our historical society at this time. My questions were more of is there any advancements that we can do in addition to help, and then again communication. But for me, the rooftop additions, my only other concern is just making sure, and I don't know if this is where it is appropriate to address it, but how to address public safety with rooftop additions, and when thinking about the historical landmarks, how do we go about then creating those railings and barriers? My suggestion would to be also maybe consider having a setback inside the rooftop, to where because it kind of does seem like that there's an original line of sight setback, but maybe a minimum. Think about that, a minimum setback away from the parapets.
Well, it depends so much on the building, and the Secretary of the Interior standards are that it should be set far enough back that it's really not visible from the street.
So we can't expand.
So I think it depends, I think it depends on the structure. Maybe one building, and on the height of the structure, and on what they're planning to build on the rooftop.
So we can't explore a minimum?
Well, we can explore it, but what I'm saying is I'm not sure that you can have one standard for every
That's what I'm asking, is can we explore a minimum?
We can do that.
So unless you're telling me we can't.
No, I'm not telling you we can't. I'm just
Okay.
saying that I'm thinking
Thank
off
you.
the top of my head right now.
That's what I'm
The
asking.
buildings are different heights, and depending on what structure is being put on top of the roof.
I understand that you're thinking a few steps ahead, but I'm just trying to open up conversation in that, and I just wanted to see if it could be explored.
Sure.
Thank
We can
you.
explore it.
With that, do we have any other additional comments? Can I get a motion?
Make a motion to make a favorable recommendation for petition TA-017-204, as the text amendment request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and future planning goals of the town of Waxhaw, is reasonable and in the public's best interest, as it allows for economic growth while preserving the history and character of downtown Waxhaw.
Can I get a second, please?
I second that.
All those in favor of text amendment TA 0172024. Can we do a combined reasonable and consistency statement on this one for text amendments, or does it have to be separate motions?
Oh, you just did it combined.
Just did it.
Oh, thank you. So, okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back, Madison.
Hello again. All right. This text amendment is a request by your own planning department to amend Land Development Code Chapter 7.4 to add additional language for greenways. So the purpose of this text amendment is to add clarifying language to ensure future greenways proposed in the 2023 PED plan are built to town standards. So staff is requesting the text below that's in red. So this is our current standard for greenways. So we want to ensure that all greenways are paved and built to town standards as shown in adopted plans, unless the zoning administrator determines that an exception is warranted based on site-specific conditions or other related factors. So this text amendment comes forward as one of our former developments that went through the preliminary plat process. There was a disagreement on what a proposed PED improvement was to look like, because our PED plan called a greenway or a trail as either paved or unpaved. So we wanted to add clarifying language to our land development code to ensure that it is always paved and built to our town standards, so it's clear and concise and understandable for all parties, including town staff and the development community.
So wasn't like a crushed granite or allowed essentially? Is that what was allowed, like a crushed granite or
yeah, that's pretty much what was allowed, because our PED plan allowed for an unimproved surface. So instead of doing a 10-foot greenway, they did a 10-foot crush and run trail.
Okay.
And so for ease of maintenance, especially if the town is going to be maintaining it, we prefer it to be paved, because it makes it more accessible for those who are intending to use it, and then the maintenance aspect of it is far easier.
And whether it's concrete or asphalt is up to the site-specific?
It's usually asphalt. Our detail typically calls for asphalt. Now, we have the approved details, but just because our PED plan was unclear of which to use over the other, we're adding specifics on that it has to be paved and meet our cross-section for that standard.
There was something that I was working on here with Lisa before her departure that her and I were in discussion with that I'd like to bring up regarding the greenways. One of the things that we were in discussion, along with being paved of the crush and run, was having the setbacks from the trail. And so her and I were in discussion, so for like a 10-foot setback, there would be a 2-foot there would be an additional 2 feet of clearance on each side of the trail. That way, then if people were walking and one person was riding a bike, there was a possibility of someone moving over with maybe a stroller or something like that, giving essentially some elbow room.
Additional clearance.
And additional clearance from those trails. And her and I were working on that, and I was hoping that we could pick up, since this was on the agenda, additional conversation and maybe making that so if we call for 10-foot paved, we're asking for 14 feet of clearance, essentially, or easement on those trails, so we can have that space.
Yeah, we usually have again, if it's a 10-foot paved, we usually have a 20-foot easement over it to ensure that we have maintenance over it. I think right now our standard, I don't know if James would know this, but I think it has a foot offset on each side for a greenway.
And her and I were talking about
But for 2 feet, that's something that we can change administratively in our engineering manual.
Yeah, we were talking about increasing it to additional, or or maybe even having it to where the PED trails are marked for bicycles on one side, and where, hey, this is
like signage.
Some signage on this too, not just paved.
Okay. Yeah, that's something that we can work on administratively. I was unaware that you and Lisa had talked about that. So that's something that we can work on administratively and do.
It was one of those things we had
just a side conversation you were touching base on a couple times?
Yeah, just general conversation, just hanging out, like, what about this, what about that? Hey, maybe this plan works, but can we get some extra easement to make sure that there's, on these, especially on these crush and run trails, they were only doing 4 feet for a little while, 4 foot, and we're like, that's pretty small pathway if you're wanting dual movement on these trails.
Yeah, HOA maintained trails, they're typically either, well, I've seen both. Some are 5-foot crush and run, some are 5-foot paved, some are 8-foot paved. We're focusing on making sure that anything proposed by the PED plan meets our standards, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about what they want to do. But I appreciate you bringing up the 2 feet on each side, and then also additional signage.
Thank you.
Okay, cool.
Any other additional comments on this item? Can I get a motion? And the consistency statement up, please. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, planning staff recommendation, we recommend the text amendment, and then your requested actions here.
Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve the text amendment TA 018-2025-2024, the Greenway update. And as far as reasonable consistency, the text amendment requested is consistent with the comprehensive plan and future planning goals of the town of Waxhaw, and it's reasonable in the public interest that it offers clear standards for future greenways required by the 2023 pedestrian plan.
All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Thank you so much, everybody. I'd like to go ahead and skip work section.
Make a motion adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
All approved? Aye.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.